But I just wanted to do a little housekeeping, and then I was going to introduce our presenter today, so you can listen to her speak. First of all, if you're a Vet Corps, if you're here for Vet Corps or AmeriCorps, after, not now, because I'm going to be disruptive, but afterwards, please come by your desk so I can stamp a piece of paper so you can get credit for being in this session. Not that you need the credit. I'm sure you'd love to listen just by yourself, but I want to make sure you get the credit. So, so I'm going to introduce our speaker and we'll get to it. So our speaker today for the military sexual trauma is Dawn Gray. Dawn Gray is a retired lieutenant colonel who served 28 years in the U.S. Army as a behavioral health officer. She currently serves at the VA as the MST coordinator and Ptsd therapist.
In Spokane, Washington.
So that's me. Please interrupt me if you have a question, okay? Just jump in. And if I ask you a question, I will wait you out until somebody answers. I am hardcore that. This is a tough conversation to have, right? It's a tough conversation. It's kind of important that we get comfortable with it, though. Are you all providers? Do you all take care of veterans in some capacity? Okay. So it's important to have this conversation, right? But it's a tough conversation to have, and almost everyone feels a little uncomfortable, right? How many of you are social workers? So you guys ask personal, intrusive, appropriate questions at cocktail parties. So you're comfortable with it, right? But most people have to learn about this, right? We're going to define military sexual trauma, talk about the impact, and talk about recovery, okay? You can recover. I want you to start out with that belief, right? People can get better. People do get better. It's hard, though, right? We have this wonderful support team. Believe it or not, even though we're talking about one of the biggest bureaucracies on earth, the VA does have a great MST support team. These are human beings who answer this public problem. They do. It's great. Their job is to conduct national monitoring. So that means that we need to know when it comes to VA, VHA, right? How many people are coming in that need help with this? How many people are coming in from particular units, right? What if we find out that Marine Recon units have a really high percentage of MST? Then we're going to probably talk to the Marine Corps. Hey, listen, we're seeing a bunch of your people. What's happening? What are you guys doing for training? Right? So it's important for us to do that monitoring. We do a lot of expanding of education and training. What do we mean by best practice?
Say again, please, Don.
What do we mean by best practice?
Industry standards.
Yeah. What else?
Everything in space.
Say again.
Everything in space.
Everything in space?
Evidence based.
Evidence based. Yes. Best practice means, you said it, it works. We're going to use techniques, protocols that work, right? If we find out that getting my 6 hens in there, walking across the counter and squawking and jumping up and down has fantastic effect, we're going to do that, right? We do a lot of research. Where did this research start, by the way? You know, the VA is the best in the world at treating PTSD. How about that? We're better than the Israelis. We're better than the Brits. We're better than the Aussies. Because until Vietnam, we didn't even know what it was. We weren't doing a very good job at all. But after Vietnam, the Vietnam veteran came to the VA and said, hey, you're going to take care of us or what? And we started doing research. And now we're really good. We're really good. Of course, we provide consultation and policy recommendations. We are a cabinet level position, right? So that means we report all the way up. What is a psychological trauma?
What is that?
They know that we don't. What's a psychological trauma? My answer to that is it depends. Right? If you ask a Marine in combat, is this a traumatic experience for you? The Marine would not be sure what the hell you're asking, right? hear about it. And this is important too. Fear, helplessness, or horror. Okay? These are the reactions that people have when confronted with traumatic experience. Okay? If you have no fear, you're probably not experiencing a traumatic event. Okay? Broader definition, a serious injury or shock to the body. It's usually incomprehensible. Do all of you know, are all of you comfortable with the definition of PTSD? Does this make sense to you? Feel like you know? So when we say military sexual trauma, we're talking about sexual assault. Why do we say or sexual harassment? Do you think sexual harassment is on the same level as sexual assault? How many of you say no? How many of you say yes? Why would you say yes?
Because it can have the same impact on the individual regardless.
Why?
Because it's traumatic.
Because it's the military context.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the military, if you are experiencing sustained sexual harassment by a superior and you can do nothing about it, this is why in the military it's a little bit different animal, right? Of course, sexual assault, we would all agree, sexual assault is military sexual trauma, right? So look at this. Physical assault of a sexual nature, battery of a sexual nature, or sexual harassment repeated. In the military, it's pretty hard to get away from the perpetrator, right? Most of the time in the military, the perpetrator is someone you know and trust with your life. We'll get into that more later. We broaden that into any of these kinds of activities, right? Here's some of what can be involved. Does this make sense? On or off base, on or off duty, it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. People from all eras of service have reported this. This is sad, but it's true. 1 in 5 women, and I'm 100% confident it's higher in men.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to do research with men. My last duty assignment was in a warfighting brigade. You know how big a brigade is. And if you want to have a conversation with warfighters about this, you got to do it privately, one-on-one, right? They're not going to have a conversation with you in public. You can't, do a lot of training with these folks. Go ahead.
Back one screen, you had civilian. So if the veteran experienced sexual trauma in service by a civilian who was not in service, how do you substantiate that?
You don't need to substantiate it. You're there at the VA. That happened to you when you were in the military. We'll take care of it.
Okay.
This is different from the reporting arm. We'll talk about that later. This is the VA. We take care of veterans. You don't have to have it substantiated.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there's a different issue if you're talking about service-connected disability and filing for a claim. I have no part of that.
Right.
And they do ask those kinds of questions, substantiated. Typically, a veteran is going to get medical care at their local facility, and they can say, here's what happened to me, and it's in the records, medical records.
Right, but I'm talking about non-reported.
Yeah, because people don't report. Yeah.
Or their husband, or their significant other.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to substantiate it to get care on VA. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so when I started in the military back in the 90s, we were 40% female in medical units. Medical units are still 40% female, maybe even higher, but we were about 3% female throughout the rest of the military, throughout the rest of the Army. We're much higher numbers of females now. Females, of course, are not the only people who experience sexual trauma, but they experience it in much higher numbers, right? There's lots of different kinds of symptoms that we address in therapy, including, of course, grief and loss, physical, emotional, cognitive. There are a lot kinds of symptoms that we have to help people with when they come to us for care. This fellow here talks about trajectories of grief and loss, but he also talks about resilience and recovery. Have you ever heard the phrase post-traumatic growth? What do you think about that? What do you think about post-traumatic growth? What does this sound like? Yes, it sounds like growing after trauma. That's right. That's where you do it, yeah. Do we grow after trauma? Depends, doesn't it? Depends. If you get the care you need, for sure you grow after trauma. Right? For sure you do. I can tell you, I never thought I could tolerate the kind of heat that we experience in the desert when you're in full body armor. It's 128 stupid degrees outside. But guess what? Not only did we survive it, we all learned that we can function in that kind of heat, right? It was awful, it was tough, it was miserable, and we complained a lot. By the way, should I just apologize now? I may swear. Oh, I try hard not to, but 28 years in the Army, I won't try. Please don't be offended. But anyway, yeah, trajectories of grief and loss and trajectories of trauma. We, of course, also see chronic dysfunction. What do you think we see? What kind of dysfunction do you think we see with folks who have experienced MST?
Relationship issues.
Bingo!
Anxiety,
Number one. Yep.
panic attacks,
Yep.
hyper-awareness.
Yep. So now you're talking about PTSD in general. Yeah. Military sexual trauma almost always results in relationship issues, results in problems with trust, problems with power and control, problems with safety, problems with esteem, and problems with intimacy. And intimacy, of course, isn't just about your relationship with your significant other. Intimacy is about your relationship with yourself. Right? Yeah. So here's some of the ways trauma affects people. It does affect how we think about ourselves, others, and the world. If you think back to the first traumatic experience you had in your life, might have been the loss of a parent or loved one, might have been the loss of a pet, might have been something like this. Did you see the world differently afterward?
Yes.
But did the world change? It's the same planet. It's the same world. But you learned something about the world, and now you see it differently. But it's the same world. And getting people to return to, if they choose to, return to the way they used to see the world is possible. Please, please believe me, it is possible to return to that level of joy and innocence and enthusiasm and optimism. It is possible. People do experience tremendous changes in their worldview, right? Doesn't have to be permanent. These are common diagnoses. It's very interesting that whenever I do presentations like this, and I ask everyone, especially doctors and nurses that come to work in the VA, and I ask them, what kinds of diagnoses are associated with MST? Almost everyone says number one. But what else do you think could be associated with it? Besides mental health conditions?
Substance abuse?
Sure, absolutely. Substance abuse, yep. What else?
The disassociate.
That's a mental health disorder.
Yeah, we work with homeless veterans, but we see that.
Yep, for sure. What else? Think medical. Go ahead.
STDs.
Well, yeah, of course. When you think of the S in post-traumatic stress disorder, what do you know about chronic stress? Overeating, obesity, what'd you say? That's everything. Hypertension, right? All kinds of things. It's very important to remember that, right? Because what can happen as a result is completely unique to the individual and how they cope. Okay? Who said relationship issues? Yep, number one thing we see. Why is that? Relationships require openness and vulnerability, don't they? Yep, for sure. We know that people who experience MST are more likely to develop PTSD than combat trauma. Yes? What?
I have a thought on that.
Yeah.
Because with combat trauma, even though it's still something that's triggering, sometimes triggering it, you can
partly rationalize that you're in a safe space. If you've experienced MST, you're never in a safe space.
Never a safe space, right? Good, yeah. Yep, it's true. So, this is a study of Gulf War, and we see this in all eras, all wars. And operations other than war, Kosovo, Panama, right? So why is it so toxic? I'm going to propose to you that it's because of the relationship that people have within a military unit. Those of us who served in uniform will tell you, you're going to be respectful to people you don't like. You're going to give your life for someone you don't like. Because that's the way it works in uniform. That's the way it works in a team, right? You make a promise. You make a promise to the American people to protect and defend the Constitution, no matter what. You make a promise to obey the orders of the people appointed over you, no matter what, including give your life for the cause, for the mission, right? That becomes more important to you than yourself, which is why it's very hard to get people to report. Because what happens when you report? Number one thing these days that will happen is the unit will be disbanded and an investigation will take place. So if the unit's disbanded and you're a small recon team or you're a ranger team and you're forward behind enemy lines, what's going to happen to your mission?
It's going to fail.
What's going to happen to the people to your left and right that are depending on you?
You're going to be at risk.
I mean, and military people always will say, the mission is more important than me as an individual, I'm just going to put up with this till I can get away, till we complete our mission. But there's lots of reasons why, and recovery from MST can be longer and more difficult and more complex than recovery from straight PTSD or other kinds of trauma-related conditions, right? It's perpetrated by someone you know and trust with your life. I can tell you so many stories. I've been doing this for 25 years. I remember a command sergeant major, you know what command sergeant major is? My God, right? She put out the rule in Iraq that no one goes anywhere. What? Alone. You gotta have a battle buddy. But she was very popular. She was very fit. The only time she could get alone to do her workouts in the gym was at 4 in the morning. And how many people can be a battle buddy to a command sergeant major? So she went alone frequently to the gym, despite her rule. But she figured nobody would know, right? Guess what happened to her? Not only did she never report, but this plagued her throughout the remainder of her Army career. She would never report. Why? Full of shame. Matter of fact, I will tell you, never once have I worked with a single veteran who does not have some component of shame and self-blame. That, to me, is one of the hardest things to get people through. If I could dispense with shame, I'd probably be out of a job. Shame is such a huge component of this kind of thing, right? There are lots of implications for people who survive military sexual trauma and understanding what it means to them. Again, in almost every case, it means something about them. Most people will tell me, I should have, fill in the blank. I should not have, fill in the blank. And I'm sitting there across the desk listening to them thinking, do you honestly think, thinking this, I don't say it, do you honestly think there's anyone else responsible for what happened to you besides the perpetrator? But they do, right? They do. One thing that's really tough in the military is the feeling of helplessness. Does the Marine Corps teach you how to be helpless? I mean, that's not something we train, right? We do train people to experience helplessness if they go through the SEER school. You know what the SEER school is? Right. So in some cases, special units get trained to feel helpless, to be imprisoned, to be beaten, to be humiliated, right? That's a very, very tiny percentage of the military. So most of us never get that training, right? We also have an extremely high value placed on loyalty. Anybody ever had their supervisor in the military say, you know, don't you go around me, right? There's a chain of command for a reason. And you're like, Jimmy, you're the problem, sir. We have it set up so you can go around somebody who's the problem, right? But what's going to happen to you if you do, right? Yeah. We know that MST occurs where people live and work. There's very little privacy in the military. Certainly underway, like on a big battleship. Definitely in the battlefield. I think the only place I ever got to sleep when I was forward in the battlefield was, shoulder to shoulder with drinks. Because there's no other safe place to sleep, right? We'd take over a combat outpost and you'd sleep on the dirt in a big room together. There's no other place to be private. Just because I was an officer doesn't mean I get any privacy, right? Yeah. It's a complex trauma because it involves interpersonal victimization by a known perpetrator. Usually it occurs early in people's development. So one of the things we implemented in the Army in my last few years in uniform was to talk to our youngsters coming in. When I say youngsters, anybody under 30 we talked to our young people coming in about how to set boundaries in a professional, respectful, but effective way. Now, if you're 17 years old, do you know how to do that? No. It's like, you're either going to go way overboard and say, get your blanket hands off me first, Sergeant, right? Or you're not going to say anything because you don't know how. You don't know how to set those boundaries, right? And I'll tell you, I think this is in this presentation also, maybe later. It's true that a lot of people are re-victimized if they were victimized as children. And there's lots of research into why that is. My belief is that it's because they never learned healthy boundaries. They didn't learn that their boundaries would be respected as children. I'm talking about childhood sexual abuse, right? We try to help people understand that feeling that they're going crazy is normal, unfortunately, right? Almost always, crazy behaviors have a self-protective function. Can you think of one? What looks like crazy behavior? Yeah.
Hypervigilance?
That looks like crazy behavior?
Well, it could.
Yeah, that's true. So what protective function would that have?
Well, you don't feel, if you're having a feeling, if you've been victimized, you don't have that feeling of being safe, so the boogeyman is around every corner.
Yep. So you are watching people's hands, you know where your exits are, you're always aware of everything, your head's on a swivel. Right. Somebody else over here have a thought? Yeah.
Overreaction.
Okay, give me an example.
Exploiting of people, so you constantly push them away so nobody comes and gets in your space.
You made all those links. Overreacting so that you scare people away, so that nobody gets into your space, so that you're safe. Right. Yep, definitely. You see a lot of that, right? Yeah, for sure. Good. How about nightmares and memories out of nowhere? Anybody have nightmares? 100% of you have had a nightmare, I promise. Oh gosh, she's gonna call me. No, I promise I won't make you tell me your nightmares. But what are nightmares? What are nightmares? And by the way, how many nightmares a week are normal in the American population? 0 nightmares per week are normal. 2 to 3 nightmares a month are normal in the American population. This is the American population I'm talking about. That's different in other places, but that's normal for us. In Asia, it's very unusual to have that many nightmares in a month. Why is that? Why is that? I don't know. It's an unprocessed memory many times, right? Matter of fact, the way we treat trauma is to process that trauma so that you're not going to have this stuff show up unbidden. How about feelings of numbness? Why is numbing helpful to people who've been through trauma?
Emotional or physical?
Yes. Mike?
You're feeling nothing, then that means you don't want to feel everything all the time, all at once, which is what.
Kind of flooding.
Yeah.
What do you learn about feelings in the battlefield? There's one feeling that has a lot of value. Anger. Anger is very effective in the battlefield, right? If you can get angry, you can generate adrenaline, which which makes you feel powerful, which helps you do your job faster, right? Even if you're exhausted. Adrenaline is helpful. But numbing is the way that a lot of people distance themselves from emotions that make them feel weak or that allow emotions to flood them, for sure. Yep. How about self-blame? Always I hear this. Always I hear self-blame. And this is a way of confronting the truth. That it's the perpetrator who did it, and we could do almost nothing about it, right? This happened. And how do you explain that it happened? Almost everyone has ever been in my office says, why did this happen to me? What's the answer to that? Right? Why did that earthquake happen? You know, I mean, you can point to causal factors, I suppose, inadequate security on base. I mean, who knows, right? But why did it happen to you? Biggest hurdle is to get over this and shame. Biggest hurdle I have. We're definitely going to have difficulties in interpersonal relationships for the reasons you outlined. Yeah, very helpful. And fighting back, you get people who are very aggressive, right? Very belligerent. And you may have coworkers or employees who overreact to legitimate criticism from a boss because they're not going to let anybody get that close to them again. They're not going to let you attack them. They feel very defensive, right? However, there are good, solid, normal reasons for what they do. And it's great if you can begin to understand them. It's very helpful, right? Coping, definitely feeling in control. The thing is, though, we can help people find other ways to get these needs met. Have you ever met someone who's been through trauma who wants to control every single aspect of their life? Every single aspect of their life, right? That's a lot of effort, by the way. It's exhausting. But you can understand why, right? Not everybody needs treatment. What do you think of that? You believe me? How many of you don't believe me? How many of you think everybody who's had this experience needs treatment? A couple of you? Okay. What do you mean by treatment? Formal treatment? Spiritual treatment? Meditation? Huh?
What is therapy?
What is therapy? Yes, that's a great question. Not everyone needs treatment. I agree, most people do, right? But listen, we're talking about military people, right? These are tough, resilient folks. They're used to learning how to take care of themselves and others, right? Under high stress situations. So if they are willing to process what happened, they might be able to do that with a friend. They might be able to talk about what happened. They might be able to report it and follow through with the reporting, which is hell, by the way. They might be able to do that and feel better, be able to understand what happened, and be able to go on with their lives. It's rare, but it does happen. What are the obstacles to seeking treatment? A lot of people, because they don't report, when they get home, and now they're ready to get help, their family is like, you never said anything about that. Are you sure that happened? Why are you making this up? When I was in the battlefield, I didn't tell my Italian family a tenth of what was going on in the battlefield because they would show up. Seriously, Italian food. And then when I got home, we were all having a welcome home party, and we're talking about that one time when my mother called, and we were getting hammered and rocketed, and my mother's staring at me like, what? You said you were never around anything. I'm like, well, Ma, what would have happened if I would have told you? You know. So we don't tell people back home what's really going on. And then when we're ready to get help, the family's like, what? Especially spouses. They feel very betrayed. Yeah. At the VA, we're not the only place to get care, but we're really good at this. Just saying, we're really good at this. Not perfect, but pretty good. VA disability rating is not required. Are you the one? Oh, she left. So, people don't have to have a service-connected disability rating to get free care through the VA. The reason why we say free is this big deal. What if you are a neurosurgeon? and you make, what do neurosurgeons make? $500,000 a year. But you really want to get the best care you can for MST. Where are you going to go? You're going to have such a high copay that it wouldn't make any sense for you to come to the VA. Unless it's about this. There's no copay, there's no service connection required, you don't have to go apply for benefits. None of that's required. The other thing that's really cool is that we will see people who were discharged under other than honorable circumstances for care related to MST. Why do you think we made that policy change?
Because people get discharged for their attitude and behavior afterwards.
How do you get dishonorably discharged from the military? That's true. That's what happens. What does it take to get a dishonorable discharge?
It could
One
be,
word.
well, it could be
Misconduct.
well, not only just misconduct. I mean, if they're suffering from an MST, their performance, due to being depression, if they didn't report it, their performance is going to drop way below required, standards,
Yep.
which would, to get a dishonorable discharge, it may say malingering on there or something like that.
Yep.
And if they haven't reported, it doesn't paint the picture of what really happened.
Right. And recognizing that a lot of people don't report, we have this policy change. They don't even have to have reported it. I have had the experience as a therapist for the VA of someone coming to me, still serving, and saying, I'm ready to report. Can you help me? No, I cannot help you report. I can give you the phone number of who to call. My job is to treat you. My job is to help you recover, not to help you report. And I don't participate in that at all. Except sometimes I'll sit in the room with them when they tell CID what really happened, right? CID? Okay. We also have residential care, by the way. So trauma therapy is pretty tough. And I am a trauma therapist, but I'm telling you, it's super hard to go through. It just is. But sometimes people can't do it as an outpatient. So if that's the case, we have residential programs. One of them, just saying, is in Hawaii. Bay Pines, Florida, But yeah, residential programs are also pretty tough. But let's say you're a single dad, you're raising kids, trying to go to school, and I want you to come into my office once a week. By the way, no more drinking. You can't drink any alcohol while you're in therapy with me. And alcohol is very effective at reducing anxiety, right? Right. No alcohol. I'm going to put you on a rigid sleep cycle because you have to sleep. I'm going to ask you to come in once a week, relive the trauma, and do homework every single day of your life. 7 days a week. Homework every day. And if you're doing prolonged exposure therapy, you're going to do up to 2 hours of homework a day. And by the way, your symptoms will probably increase initially. Okay? Right? We good? A lot of people can't do it. They try, but it's just too much. It's a lot. Right? And so then we have residential programs. Some of them are only about 30 days. And they can get past the worst, they can begin the processing, and then come back to us and come see us every, once a month, every 3 weeks, and we can do it that way, if that's what's necessary. And we pay for everything, by the way. Very easy to get into care, right? Do you think it is? No? Does anybody think it's easy? Not easy to get into care at the VA? What do you mean? Just call us up and come in, right?
Depends on who you call.
Well, I'll tell you, I've been at the VA for a really long time, and we have had some challenges. Yeah. When it comes to MST, people can get in pretty fast, usually. But we have 50% vacancies right now in behavioral health. We have a new electronic health record that makes people want to quit or throw their computer through the window, myself included. I hate it. There are challenges. I'm not trying to make excuses, but and we do have a waiting list right now for standard general behavioral health, counseling. But in general, to get into counseling for this condition or anything related to this condition, you can just call me or you can call anybody at the VA. They will transfer you directly to my phone, and we will get you started on the intake. Any questions about that? Or did you have a different experience? I don't know.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So she's saying that she has been told that she's not going to be allowed to continue seeing her civilian therapist because we offer that service at the behavioral health service in Spokane, but yet the waiting list is pretty long to get into care, so why can't she continue to see her civilian therapist? So the short answer, I'm guessing, because I don't know your particular case, I'm guessing is because we have that service that you want at the VA in the behavioral health program. And since we have that service, we're not going to pay for you to go see someone unless you meet the other criteria, like one's 30 miles away, the wait list is longer than 30 days, you have a specialty care need that we don't provide. Yeah, but there's a waiting list. It's just chaps my hide. And anybody who works at the VA has the same experience, I'm sure. It's very frustrating to all of us. I'm on the trauma team, the specialty care team. By the time someone gets to the PTSD clinical team, we can see them within usually 4 days. But you got to go through the intake, you got to jump through these hoops, right, before you can even get to them. So, and all we do on the PTSD clinical team is treat trauma. Military sexual trauma is a source of trauma. It's one source of trauma. Lots of other things can be traumatic experiences and result in PTSD. Questions so far? No? Go ahead.
When accessing services, is all someone need to say, I've experienced MST, or are you then going to ask them to elaborate?
I will eventually, yes.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah. So when veterans first show up at the VA, they go through eligibility. Like they're just coming off of active duty.
I'm familiar. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was not fun.
No, but
Eligibility will say, what are you eligible for? They'll look at your income, blah, blah, blah. And then if you say, by the way, usually they will ask you. You know, we have learned that people typically don't jump up and say, this happened to me. We have to ask. I spend a lot of time training our providers to ask. Right? We call it screening, but it's very important to ask people. They're not going to just volunteer that information. When they ask you, then they have to determine, is the episode of care related to MST? This is important because some of the episodes of care are going to result in a copay to you, right? Like if you show up and you're having heart arrhythmia and you need to go see the cardiologist, there might be a copay for that, or some medication that we offer you as a result of your visit with the cardiologist. But if it's related to MST, there's no copay for anything. So that's why they ask that question. Now, what happens in trauma therapy? You guys are never going to come see me after What happens in trauma therapy? I already said, what happens? We're going to talk about it. We're going to process it. Anybody heard of EMDR? Okay, you don't have to talk about it in EMDR. But I don't do EMDR. I wish I did. EMDR is a eye movement desensitization and retraining. Does not require you to talk about what happened. It does require that you bring it forward in your consciousness and you think about it and you have it present, and then you process it with some lights or tapping or whatever. But you don't have to talk about it. Kind of cool. Anybody ever done it? EMDR. What do you think?
It's amazing. For trauma. Yeah.
Yep, it's amazing. It's a weird gimmicky thing, though, right?
Yeah, it feels a little magical. You're like, are you sure?
Yeah. When you kind of sit down and they're like, see this light bar? Watch the light.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. Okay, roger that. Go ahead.
Does anyone offer it?
Yes. Well, we recognize it as an evidence-based treatment option. We don't have a human being at present in my office that is certified. Well, the Veterans Outreach Center has people who do it, yes. And the Veterans Outreach Center only sees combat veterans, but they also see veterans who have this experience. Okay? So that qualifies you for veterans, for VOC, Veterans Outreach Center, or the Vet Center. And they do have a couple of people there that are certified in EMDR. I think it's good stuff. I think we should do it. But to get certified in EMDR takes almost a year. Anybody here certified in EMDR? It takes almost a year. It's very expensive to get that certification. Wasn't it? Who was it? Like Shapiro? Somebody who developed it? Yeah. It's almost like a cult following. Like, you gotta be on the inside, and you gotta,
It's like
get voted on the
$2,500 2 weekend, 40 hours of training, and then it's combined with like 6 supervisions after that.
Yeah.
6 month training.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Any other questions?
What's the highest proposed pay to be?
I have no idea. Yeah, could be 100%, I'm guessing. I have no idea. But if the care is related in any way to MST, there's no copay no matter what. That, I have a lot of people ask it. Matter of fact, I had a guy that was about a third of the way through trauma therapy, and he gets a letter from the VA saying, sorry, you gotta pay all this copay for each session. And he's like, it's combat-related PTSD. And so he had never filed for a service-connected claim because he didn't want to file for a claim. He just wanted to get better. And I started looking into it, which is really outside my responsibility. But I'm so mad. Turns out he does have to file because he makes too much out there in the world. Say again.
Well, I was wondering what 100% could be, because it was thrown out, it could be 100%, so, okay, well, what is that?
So like a visit with me, like $120 an hour. So this guy ended up having to file a claim and wait for a decision. And meanwhile, he's 1/3 of the way through treatment. And technically speaking, we were supposed to stop treatment because he was not eligible for free care. Here's the thing about the Spokane VA, which is different from other VAs, as I understand it. We have a culture that says, first we take care of the veteran, then we take care of the money. And so you can get around that. You can get around it. It's just not easy. It takes jumping up and down, screaming and yelling, showing up at the director's office. You got to have an advocate. And we do have pretty decent patient advocates there. I'm not supposed to be a patient advocate, but in this case, I was like, oh, hell no, this is so wrong. We're going to finish our therapy, and you're going to suspend your collection efforts because he's in the process of applying anyway. Even if he was found service-connected at a 0%, he still would have no copay, right? 0% just says, here's how many dollars we're going to pay you for that injury, right? Like almost everybody who's been in the battlefield has some hearing problems, right? So most people who apply for a hearing problem connected to disability get 10%, right? But you might have a disability, but it's not really affecting you enough to rise to the level of the VA disability calculus, which if you ask me how to do that, I can't. You can have 5 different disabilities, each of which are at 50%, and your ultimate disability is at 60%. I can't explain to you how the calculus works. It's some kind of, you know what I'm talking about?
Don, could I clarify maybe?
Go ahead, yeah.
Is you were injured on the job, and you could get 0%, and it hasn't affected you till years later. So at least the government is identifying that you have been injured on the job. That's the terms I use with people.
Yeah.
Because,
And you would know.
Yeah.
Weren't you a service officer for a long time?
I partially do service officer work, yeah. I tell people where to go, to the experts, but I help them with the first part.
Yes, you do. I know people you help. Yeah, so, go ahead.
I call it non-compensable, which means the VA acknowledges that you have a service-connected disability, but at the rate it doesn't warrant doesn't warrant any money. But if that condition got worse, you could get compensation for it. But you get VA health care with
Get VA health care.
at 0%.
Right. Does that make sense, everybody? So you could have let's just use myself as an example. I had to dive out of a gun truck, right? I was pretty sure we were about to blow up. Of course, I hadn't slept for 3 days, and I was pretty scared because I can't shoot. I might be able to hit the side of that building right now with my weapon. I mean, I'm a terrible shot. I was in the battlefield, and I dove out of a gun truck. It was very funny in retrospect. Not funny for me at the time. And I injured my shoulder, and it was pretty funny. However, now I've got a problem, right? I've got to fix this shoulder. And the VA said, well, that's a combat injury. Okay, it was an overheated battery, but rock on. But if it had not been a combat injury, if I had not really injured my shoulder to the point that I had to have surgery, I might still have been able to file and say, yeah, I died of this gun truck and, my shoulder's kind of achy. They might have said, yeah, okay, yep, there's good evidence that that really happened to you, but we're not going to pay you because you're still riding horses and doing crazy things. So obviously you're not too injured, but you get free care at the VA related to that because it happened on the job. Make sense? Questions that I can answer? Okay. How many of you have gone to our website, va.gov? It's awesome. How about apps? You guys know about our apps? Please learn about our apps. We have all kinds of cool apps. You know why I'm telling you about that? Because all of the veterans who are coming out of the military right now are very interested in apps. They're all technologically, and this is people who didn't serve in the Air Force. Air Force is all of our go-to people for technology, but even the Army has good apps. So listen, we have apps for PTSD coach. You ever seen that? PTSD coach. We have CBTI coach. What's CBTI?
Behavioral therapy for
what?
insomnia.
Yes, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI. We have a sleep coach. We have, say again?
COVID coach?
We have a COVID coach. We have a health coach. We have a stop drinking coach, stop smoking coach, everything. Wonderful. Now, the two evidence-based treatment options that I use the most are cognitive processing therapy, CPT, and prolonged exposure therapy, PE. Okay? We have a CPT coach and a PE coach for Android and Apple both. I'm just so tickled with this. It's awesome. So please go check it out. Anybody ever heard of ACT? ACT. What's ACT?
Acceptance and commitment.
Acceptance and commitment therapy. I gathered all the behavioral health officers from all the 50 states down to Boise, Idaho. We did a long weekend in ACT. Why? Because it's awesome. ACT is a really great tool to empower the individual to work on whatever they want at whatever pace they want, and we're not going to tell them what they need to fix. It's great. ACT is great. And there's an ACT coach that you can download. I love it. Questions? Okay. CPT, PE, residential. We have these symptom management classes. We have a trauma education seminar sometimes. The trauma education seminar is really attended more by you guys, providers, than it is by veterans. A lot of times veterans will come in and say, just fix me. I don't care how you do it. It's free, right? I had a command sergeant major from the Marine Corps show up. And he marched in, Marines always march in, right? And swings himself into the chair and he's like, all right, give me your spiel, doc. And I'm like, my spiel? He's like, yeah, my wife, we've been married like 30-something years, and she says she's going to leave me unless I get help, so I'm here to check the box. I'm like, oh, okay. This is going to be too hard for you. I'm telling you, if it's a Marine, tell them it's probably going to be too hard. He works every time. And he's like, yeah, well, just give me your spiel anyway. I'm like, yeah, I don't want a spiel. You either commit or just get out. So he likes that kind of language, right? So he's like, all right. What do I got to do? And I'm like, well, prolonged exposure therapy is the one for you. Because you're like, this guy, he was living in his compound up there in North Idaho, right? He had Claymore mines and perimeter defense set up around his house. His wife checked in and out, and she's had enough. She wants to go square dancing, right? So I was like, I'm not gonna square dance! Like a sergeant major. And she's like, well, I've had enough. I've had enough. I was with you through Vietnam, and this is bullshit, and I'm out. And he's like, what? So he came to see me, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be really hard. But he started it. And prolonged exposure therapy requires that you go out in the world and do exercises. He had to go to like Walmart. Can you imagine this guy in Walmart? He had to do all this stuff. So after session 3, he came in. No, it was session 4. He comes in and sits down. He's looking at me like I have, peed in his weeds. He's staring at me, and I'm like, what? He's like, I just went square dancing. And I'm like, it's amazing. Prolonged exposure sucks a lot, but it works. 10 sessions, man. 10 sessions, right? But it works. His wife came in with him on the last session, and she was crying, wanting to kiss my hand. She's like, you can't even imagine the difference in this guy. Same guy, same personality. He's square dancing, and he likes it now, and they're out traveling around the world, and doing this crazy, and he likes it. I'm like, dude, do you have like calf shoes? And he's like, but he does work. It's awesome. It really works. Yeah. CBT is 12 sessions. We learn how do we interpret the world. I think every single person on earth can benefit from CBT. You know why? Okay, I'll give you an example. So I'm back from Iraq about a month. I'm happy, life is good, the sun is shining, we have fresh eggs, everything's good. We didn't get eggs, I don't know about you, but we get eggs. Driving eastbound on I-90, broad sunny day, happy, and the next thing I know, I am swerving into oncoming traffic, and people are flipping me off and screaming and yelling. I'm like, what the hell? What do you think happened? Any idea? I saw a McDonald's garbage bag on the side of the road. What did I learn in Iraq about garbage bags on the side of the road? Plus I was going over an overpass. Okay, what happened? What triggered me to swerve into oncoming traffic besides stupidity? I was afraid. I was afraid of the garbage bag. Why was I afraid of the garbage bags? Because I blow up and they kill people. So what really happened was this. I saw the garbage bag. I interpreted the garbage bag as being threatening and dangerous and about to kill me. So then I had an adrenaline dump. So then I reacted appropriately, the way I was trained. All that happened in less than half a second. Cognitive processing therapy would say, slow down enough to listen to your thoughts. So what was my thought? It was super fast. Something like this. Oh shit, it's going to blow up. Is that a rational thought?
Yes.
Depends.
Given your past experience.
Depends. Is it a rational thought in that moment, in that spot, in North Idaho? How often do we have garbage bags blowing up in North Idaho on overpasses?
Well,
It's happening more and more.
At that time. So if you can teach people to pay attention to their thoughts, challenge that thought long enough to stop the adrenaline dump, you're probably not going to swerve into oncoming traffic. Prolonged exposure would say, we don't care what you're thinking. Just get more exposure to the garbage bags and breathe and wait and see if it blows up. Did it blow up? Nope. Go find another garbage bag. Go find another garbage bag. Drive right up to it. Feel the pucker factor. It's kind of sure it's gonna blow up. Wait. Breathe. Did it blow up? No. Go find another garbage bag. After a while, no garbage bags blow up. You have now disconnected the emotional intensity from the garbage bag trigger to your reaction. So I can drive over garbage bags then. Still annoys me, but I don't freak out. 90-minute protocol, 2 kinds of exposure, very effective. Anybody heard of this before? Prolonged exposure? Does it sound fun? Prolonged exposure. It's not fun. But it works. It's very effective. When I first got trained in prolonged exposure at the VA, my boss told me, boy, this was back in like 2009. He said, hey, you gotta go get this certification. I'm like, cool. So I sat down and watched the video, and I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not putting my people through that. And he's like, okay, well, you'll only have to do it if you want to work here. So I went and got the training, and following the training, you have to do a year of supervision where you tape record your sessions and blah, 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 blah. And every single veteran that came in my office, I talked him out of it. I'm like, oh, this is going to suck so bad. And so, of course, they all said, guys, you're right, man. If you're freaked out, I'm Well, somebody finally came in my office and he said, listen, I've tried CPT. I've tried EMDR. You're going to take me through this. Okay, man, this is really going to suck. It's like, for me or for you? So we went through it. And, I mean, session 5, the guy was like, I'm not carrying a gun around with me anymore. I'm sleeping at night. So I'm like, well, shit. So I took another guy through it. Same thing. Unbelievably rapid progress. So, man, I drink the Kool-Aid and I do it all the time now. Straight stuff. It's hard. It's hard, but it's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Say it as loud as you can, because they
you're
can't.
having to do homework. Do you ever go out?
I never go out with them, and neither does their battle buddy. They gotta do it by themselves. Yes.
Okay. And then, how do you, it sounds like you follow the protocol pretty CPT or, because your students kind of feel like, how do you kind of make the determination what direction you're going to go?
Oh,
You like
great.
basically offer up these.
Yeah. Here's our menu of services. Pick that one. Okay, so prolonged exposure therapy is really very effective in people who are doing what? Avoiding. Because prolonged exposure reverses that process. So if someone says to you, I'm here because I can't go to Walmart, I can't go shopping, I can't get on an airplane, I can't stand the smell of burnt meat, whatever, and I want to fix that, I would say, if a person comes to me and says, you know, I'm just pissed off all the time, and it seems like everybody's out to get me, and I don't trust anybody, and I have power and control issues or whatever, then I would say CPT. It's a longer process, it's a kinder, gentler process, and it looks at the way we think. This one is very focused on an incident, and it gets people through it pretty fast. Yeah. Tell you a lot of things. Yeah, prolonged exposure therapy is imaginal. What happens in my office in 90 minutes is a person will talk through using present tense language, eyes closed, talk through an event as though it were happening right now. So that means you're going to be talking about all the details of what happened. And I'm floating through the air because I'm on fire and I'm turning upside down because the vehicle is going into the dip. I mean, they're talking in present, and they're tape recording themselves while they do that. They take that tape recording home with them, and they listen to that tape recording, eyes closed, headphones on, every single day. The next week when they return, what do you mean? Doesn't it sound great? The next week when they return, they make another recording, and listen to that every single week. So you habituate to the memory, right? The second part, in vivo, session number 1, we make a list of all the things you're avoiding. Can't stand explosions. I'm still serving, but I can't go to the range. I can't stand Walmart people, whatever, right? We make that whole list, and then we set up exercises. Am I over time? Then we set up exercises, and then they go do them. Exercise every day. Okay? Tracking? Any more questions? Okay. Oh. Wow. Look at that, you guys. So no other questions about anything. Go ahead, ask me anything. Seriously, no questions?
Move on.
Yeah.
In your experience, you said in the very beginning that MST is recoverable from. Can you, in your experience, give a rough percentage, or, I mean, everybody's different so much, but, you know, I hear so many people talk about PTSD and you can never get over it, Well, you can learn coping skills and those things too.
Yep.
But as someone who's right there with MST.
Well, okay, MST is an experience, right? You do hear people say, I have MST. Right. That's not what they have. That's like, I have car wreck, right? What they have is PTSD or some other condition, right? Do you have a question?
I do, but then.
Okay. I would say that 80% of people who fully engage, do everything I tell them to do their homework, show up, get better. And I'm going to say this in public. Somebody's going to write to my boss. PTSD is permanent.
Is what?
Permanent.
But
You're not going to get rid of it.
Yeah, but there are coping skills you can learn
Yes.
to go
You can get so much better that you don't know you have it. Right?
Right.
Matter of fact, I've been on the battlefield with a lot of people who have been through PTSD treatment, and they are safer soldiers, even though we go through another traumatic experience because they know what to do. They've been through treatment. They're going to have PTSD. It doesn't make you more vulnerable to another episode. You already have it, and you know what to do. Go ahead.
Because
I didn't mean to.
I thought you were done. Do you have another question?
okay, so MST is the trauma, and then your body's reaction to that trauma.
Exactly.
Right, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That's from a claimant's perspective, by the way, that's also another process that, like, you don't file for MST, and it's really,
Right.
just for the record. But
Yeah.
I was going to ask, one of the things that you talked about was that you can't, when he doesn't want help or doesn't want to receive help, then you can't help him.
No.
Have you experienced that as an issue with people experiencing MST? Is that something that you
Sure, of course.
or is there a good way that you help people get past that?
Nope. I am a veteran myself. I have tremendous respect for people who look at what I'm offering and say, hell no, am I going to do that? No. And they're out. And, matter of fact, as a medical officer in the battlefield, right, you can remove people from the fight if you think they're out there, right? Once in 15 months did I involuntarily remove someone from the fight, and that was an officer who literally was wigging out. I had a ranger. You guys know rangers? I had a ranger come to me and he said, "Oh, ma'am, I gotta talk to you about one of my guys."
Those guys.
That's what he said. So when you talk to rangers in the battlefield, you got to go hide somewhere, and you can't have a pencil in your hand. And ideally, you take off your name tape too, because rangers are super sensitive to being seen talking to the train. So we climbed up on this fighting position where it was just he and I, and he's like, "It's me." I'm like, "Roger, dude, what's up?" He's like, "Well, I'm pissed off all the time, and I've got these headaches." He's a ranger. I'm like, "Okay, so how long have you been here?" And he's like, "About 3 months." "How many times have you been blown up since you've been here?" "About 7 times," he said. And then he proceeds to tell me excitedly about the one time he got blown up and lost consciousness and was blown through the air and his weapon broke, and it was really cool, right? And I'm like, "Have you lost good men?" Yes, I've lost some brothers. And he's pissed off, right? So I'm like, "Well, so there's PTSD, there's TBI, there's a couple things. Why don't you come back to Camp Liberty with me and let's get you checked out?" What do you think he said? What? I can't leave my guys.
Yeah.
What happens if you're on a patrol and you go down? Are they going to leave you laying there? No. You guys are going to come collect you up, and the enemy knows that. And so I'm selling it to him, right? I'm selling it to him because I'm thinking, dude, you got to, So he finally agrees to come back to Camp Liberty with me. I drop him off at the TMC. I'm like, just take a couple x-rays, and then here's my business card. Just give me a call. We had cell phones that we carried. So I didn't see him again, which is not uncommon, right? I mean, we were taking care of 50,000 people in central Iraq. So I get this email. 3 months later, I get this email. "You son of a bitch. You suck. You ruined my life. I'm in Germany in a halo brace." You know what that is? He had a broken neck. He had a broken neck. All he would have had to do was bang his head against the side of his Humvee, and he would have been a quad. I had no idea. I just knew, there's some issues here. So he just reamed me out. He was an E7, I was an 03. Like, you don't talk to officers like that, but I probably deserved it, right? Because I did ruin his career. But I saved his life. 6 months later, I get another email. He's like, "Okay, look, I'm sorry for the way I talked to you. You saved my life. I'm a father, I'm a husband, but you did ruin my military career. I could have died with honor on the battlefield." That statement reminded me it's not up to me to decide if you are ready for treatment. It's up to you to decide that. Right? One time, only one time did I take somebody out of the battlefield. And that was a captain who was very dangerous. Only once. Because I recognize that most people serve voluntarily and honorably and want to continue that service, and they want to continue to give and be productive and mentor other soldiers coming up. So, if they come to my office and I can see that they really need the help, but they're not ready, no problem. So, yeah. I have also had people who come to my office who don't need any help and don't have a problem at all, and they don't have PTSD, and I fire their ass. I'm like, get out of my office. Go whine somewhere else. You don't have a problem. You want me to help you get a service connection or whatever, and you know, you never left the country and there's nothing wrong with you, and get out. That's rare, but it does happen. You know, stolen valor. I had a guy come in one time, and he claimed to be a ranger, and he had a major's rank and a unit crest both stuck into his beret, both at the, you know, there's a flash, and he had both. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Tell me about that. He's telling me the whole story, and I'm like, dude, you're in the wrong office. I'm the bullshit detector for the floor. Out. Yeah, he never served. And we prosecuted him, because that makes me crazy, yeah.
I'm working with a veteran who's experiencing symptoms of female sexual arousal disorder after experiencing MST, and her primary care provider at the VA was not aware of such condition and suggested that she use personal lubricant to resolve her problems. What type of provider would we ask for a referral for her to get some help?
Grown up?
I don't disagree with you, but
you should call me. You know, wow. We have a pelvic floor physical therapist who probably could help. It really depends on the veteran's goals. What do they want? Do they want to go back to a normal sexual arousal cycle? They have a relationship they want to participate in fully. Sounds like a mental health professional probably, but if the primary care provider said that, they're not expected to be mental health providers, right? Typically, they will call one of us. I wish they would call one of us to say, hey, I got this, not sure how to handle this, you know. Have you heard of PCMHI? Primary Care Mental Health Integration, PCMHI. This is a group of psychologists and social workers, therapists, clinicians who are right there in primary care. They have an office right there. So if there's a mental health condition and you're not sure what the diagnosis is and you need some help, you can just hand walk that person right to the office, right after the primary care visit. And they should be able to help you too. PCMHI only sees people about 6 sessions. And then they usually refer on to us. If they get someone who's clearly got something that requires a course of treatment, like a PTSD course of treatment, episode of care, they will send them to us, and we'll do an intake and proceed with that. So, sorry, that's crazy. Any other questions? Yeah.
You do consultation. So
free consultation
how do you-
anywhere in the world.
How do you do that?
I give you my business card, you call me on the phone, you say what the hell am I supposed to do with this situation,
Perfect.
and it's free.
You know,
Yeah.
ran into that before and just needed help.
Yeah, yeah.
Which way to go?
That's part of being the MST coordinators, that you have to be willing to do free consultation. These are my people. These are my brothers and sisters. Yeah, absolutely. We do free consultation with civilians who are willing to see our people. Before I close, unless there are any other questions, write this down. If you have not already read this book, please read Tribe. Tribe. T-R-I-B-E. Tribe. Author is Sebastian Joner. J-U-N-G-E-R. Anybody heard that name before? Have you read this book? Have you read Tribe? Please read that book. Sebastian Joner was a war correspondent who spent a year in the mountains of Afghanistan at a combat outpost, later named Restrepo, and he created a documentary about his year with the 101st at Restrepo. That's the name of the documentary. Then he came home, back to New York City, found himself pissed off, alcoholic, divorced, wondering, what the hell's wrong with me? I didn't even pick up a weapon. So he did a bunch of research into what really causes PTSD. Is it the combat experience, or is it what happens when we get home? So he looked at Native American culture and the way they received their warriors back. And he looked at American culture and the way they received their warriors back. So, that's all I'm going to say. Oh, by the way, if you want just a quick version of it, listen to the Joe Rogan podcast interview with Sebastian Joner. You're going to have to get past all the swearing and cuss words, and, you know. Joe Rogan interviewed Sebastian Joner about this book. It's fantastic. It's also on audio books, you know. All right. Any other questions?